Hi, this is Janice Wheeler. I'm the president of the Art of Management, a consulting company for healthcare professionals in Canada. And today I have the privilege of interviewing a gentleman. His name is Marc Nadeau, and he is the field sales manager for a company called Peninsula, Canada. And they have a very interesting niche market for healthcare professionals in that they deal with clients' problems on human resources, employment relations, Ministry of Labor compliance, COVID-19 protocols, IPAC, and health and safety. So welcome, Marc, to our Insights into Business for Healthcare Professionals. And we thought we'd pick your brain today on health, like the kind of HR problems that people are having with COVID-19, getting their staff back, and some want to come back and some don't, some want part-time, and some are changed as a result of being off on COVID. So tell us some of the stories about what's happening and what you guys are recommending about them.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Janice. Very happy to be joining you today, and to hopefully give a few pointers to a few business owners in the healthcare industry. And yes, I'd say we're talking to many of them right now, and have been for the past few years. Right now, we're operating in three provinces mainly, so in British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, and essentially no matter what province you're in, no matter how big your office is, you're going to be facing the same types of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So, due to COVID, some people have changed their behaviors. Of course, we're dealing with humans, so humans can be complex beings. The unique we all are, right? So, and with that comes different responsibilities as well for the business owner who may have to put up with drama now in their own business because of people changing.
Yeah.
And that drama can transform into all sorts of actions within the business. But it does not only impact one person; it might impact the whole office. It might impact you as the business owner. It might impact your patients and your business in general. So it's very important to make sure that you're able to do the right things and have rights in your own business. And
Right.
sorry, go
I
ahead. I
can
think
actually give
you
you an example of that. I just talked to a lady in the outside of Toronto area, and she has two practices and one receptionist in each. And when they came back from COVID, they were completely different people. They were
yeah.
awesome beforehand. They were perfect. And when they came back, they were cranky and difficult, and she's lost both of them. But one of them came in and said, "Oh, she's getting headaches from this stuff they're using for cleaning." She said, "It's exactly what I've always cleaned my office with, and exactly the same amount, and exactly the same products.
Yeah.
But now she's complaining like it's giving her headaches and problems, and she's just getting more and more upset, and making the person wrong, the doctor wrong for not having stayed open and kept her working while COVID was on, and all of this stuff." And finally, the doctor just said, "Okay, that's it. Like, then leave if you want to leave. Like, so it's your choice, but you don't have to stay." And so she ended up getting two new receptionists. Fortunately, there was no payouts required because they both quit of their own free will. But it was like, so she said it was like, and she's got these two people who are not as good as the ones that she had before.
Yeah,
What do you
and it's
do?
such a great question, right? And I'd say, and such a great example because a lot of people will assume that, hey, if somebody quits, I'm okay, right? Nothing
Mhm.
bad can happen to me. What we're seeing more and more of, probably also due to COVID and people almost feeling desperate and entitled, is even if someone
Oh,
resigns, like in this particular case right now, where the employee claimed that they could not work under this, they were getting headaches, and then the employer basically, instead of trying to fix the challenge or the situation, they decided to say, well, you know what, if you're not happy here, just leave, right?
hmm,
So, and the person left and resigned, but then the person still has well, basically 2 years to come back against the employer, in this
wow.
case more particularly for constructive dismissal. It can also be seen as a human rights issue as well if they did not want to help them. So they can come up with any types of
Holy
cases.
crow.
So very important to make sure that when those things happen, they are being managed and documented properly.
Wow.
Essentially, for a business owner, yes, most health professionals that we talk to, if it's a dentist, they like to take care of their patients. They like to grow the business. They don't like the paperwork aspect of things.
Yeah.
Same thing with chiropractors, physiotherapists, and everybody else as well, right?
Yep.
So we studied in the field. We're good at what we do. Yes, we're often told that we basically have to open a business. That's what you're supposed to do, right? So after a few years of practice, and once you do, which is why a lot of people come to you because they want to grow their business, have more structure,
Yeah.
but they also need to have the HR aspect of things, the health and safety aspect of things, because all the humans in the business are unique and they cause headaches for the owner because they have rights, because they know their rights. And
Mm,
unfortunately, the business owner does not know most of those things until something happens and they receive a letter from a lawyer, a letter from the Human Rights Tribunal,
right.
a letter from the Ministry of Labor, right? So, and then they have to react, turn around, and make sure they can put everything into place to keep that from happening, because those situations are stressful and they're expensive, right?
Yeah.
So, and
Personally, I don't know how a staff member would live with themselves, ethically and morally, going out of a practice and doing something like that. You
yeah,
know, we did fire somebody once. We've only ever had one bad experience. One of my execs fired somebody, maybe a little bit, not quite in the right way, but she was really bad and really causing problems and so on. And it was a mishire on our part. She hid who she was till the 90 days were up. And then we
yeah,
saw the real human being show up. And that's rare for us because we have an awesome testing system that can eliminate that mostly. But we missed on that one. And we let her go. She's a single mom struggling financially week to week to have enough money to live on. So because we knew that and we do care about people, we gave her a week's pay. 2 months later, we get a wrongful dismissal suit against us, and I go to a pretrial, and the judge in the pretrial, not in the official courtroom, he listens to both sides, and he says to me, he says, it will come across in the courts that you felt guilty about letting her go because you gave her a week's pay. And I went, that is just so wrong. We did it to help her so she could find a temp job and have enough money to get by until she got that,
yeah,
because we do care about people. And I ended up having to pay her 3 weeks, although she'd only been with us a year and a month. I had to pay 3 more weeks on top of the week I already paid. But he said something really funny. She left the room with her lawyer, and he says to me, take as long as you want to pay. It's just not right.
yeah.
But if you went to court, you would be found against. And I thought, boy, it's hard being an employer in situations like that. I find staff who do that to be evil. But anyways, there we go. You have to handle
Well,
the outcome of all that with the poor employers, right?
exactly, and right now the number of calls we're getting is just increasing, right? So people either realized that if their business was closed, they had no more income. Yes, there was CRB, but now they're starting to get letters where a lot of people have to repay that money, right? Because they just flat out refuse to come to work, and in
Oh,
that case,
interesting.
yeah. So there's a few things where people did not really qualify. The government didn't really care. They just paid everybody, but now they're
Hmm.
coming back to get some money. And so it's going to
How
get
do they
interesting.
know?
So
How did they know that the
um,
employee didn't come back when they should have?
sometimes it's based on the ROE and the letter or the code that the employer selected. So sometimes they were not laid off due to lack of work, but they just decided to say, "Oh, nope, I'm not coming in." Right. So
Wow. Good. I'm glad.
yeah, so it's going to get interesting. So we're going to see a lot more cases of people being desperate and trying to come after their employers if there was not proper
Oh,
documentation, right?
right.
So it's going to get tricky.
Oh, that's
Um, it
interesting.
it already is, right? So I'd say probably the three best keywords that I can give as advice for professionals who own their own business, who have staff, whether it's one employee or 15 or 20 or 50 staff. Um, Three keywords. Number one, documentation. Number two, documentation. And
And what
number
do you,
three,
documentation.
documentation, right?
And what do you mean by documentation? Like what kind of things do they need to document?
So for example, you talked about an executive that was in your business that was not a good fit, right? So toxic person, right? Lots of bad things happening. When stuff like this happen, when you have someone who's toxic, you need to address the behavior in writing.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we're supposedly saying that the disciplinary process is going to be the first warning is verbal. Yes, it's verbal, but you have to give them something in writing confirming the verbal warning.
Okay.
Because if
Oh,
it's
that's
not in
interesting.
writing, it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So, and then you would need to have your disciplinary process showing them what happens if they don't follow your the structure that you've put in place for the business, if they
That's the second
misbehave,
step.
right? So, well,
Or that's part of the
essentially,
first.
yeah, so it's kind of part of the first. So I'd say at the beginning, for the foundation of everything, in a perfect world, you would have all those policies put in place already for your business.
Is this
Of
what you
course,
provide your clients?
we do.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we help them create that foundation and say, listen, I have rights in my own business.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone steals from me, if I catch someone misbehaving on my security cameras, if I have some in the reception area, um, well, I'm allowed to use that footage, right? So I'm allowed to use this for disciplinary reasons or to terminate someone. But I need to have a policy that will actually state that I can use the footage for disciplinary reasons or up to termination. Otherwise, I cannot use that footage to let the person go.
Oh, wow.
So common
Okay.
sense as we know it does not apply. It's just not
Wow.
that common anymore. For things to apply to your business, they have to be in writing, right? So before, Janice, you mentioned something about someone being under probation, right? So she just passed her probation, then she changed after her 90 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So very important for employers to make sure and understand that if I don't have a probation period in writing, my employees are not under probation. They are permanent from day one. So very
I don't
important to make sure
understand
you
that.
can,
Sorry.
yeah. So
We have
the
90 days by law that you can let somebody go with no reason whatsoever other than it wasn't a perfect fit. I know that one for
you
sure.
you know what? It's part of the Employment Standards Act, right?
Yeah.
So or the Employment Standards
Yeah.
codes in Alberta. However, a probation period does not apply automatically unless you have it in writing. So what we see a lot of now is people get terminated during their probation period, and then they come after the employer for a payout,
Huh.
and they're right. So they're
I
actually
thought the
owed money.
law is in writing. Why would I have to put it in writing also?
That's such a great question and a conversation that I have all the time. So essentially, what's in the Employment Standards Act? Do you know basically how many rights are in the employment standards for the
Not a clue.
employer?
Not a clue. Probably nothing.
Zero, exactly. So
That's how
all the
it
rights.
feels. I have a great
So,
staff, so I'm not worried about that at this time, but it is interesting.
it is extremely interesting, and I'd say, you know, all those rights are there for the employee, but
Yeah.
if as an employer I want those to apply to my business, I need to have them in writing in a contract of employment.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have that, first, the probation period does not apply.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a lot of people who had to do layoffs, right? So, and due to COVID, so because of COVID, in May, the government stepped up and said, you know what, this is going to be a protected leave, right? So that's for Ontario. In Alberta, they extended it for 180 days for businesses. So that was great. And BC extended it a little bit. But for now in Ontario, it's going to be done until January 2nd. But on January 2nd, 2021, up until now, unless it changes, you have to recall the employees that were on layoff. Part of the layoff that basically, yes, again, it's part of the Employment Standards Act. A layoff is a thing, right? So it is something you're allowed to do. But again, it also has to be a contractual obligation. So in any other situation, if there's no COVID, you are not allowed to lay employees off unless they you actually have this as part of your contract of employment. Otherwise, the employee can, yeah, they can accept it. They can say, yeah, okay, I accept the layoff, right? So, or they can also turn around and say, no, 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 I do not accept the layoff. I'm going to treat this as constructive dismissal. And now you owe me termination pay. And then based on the termination pay, we talked about this as well, right? So in the Employment Standards Act, yes, it says clearly that if you work for a business and they have to let you go without cause, you're entitled to a payout, which is going to be 1 week per year worked for up to 8 weeks for 8 years or more of service with your employer.
Right.
And that applies to BC, it applies to Ontario. In Alberta, it's up to 10 weeks or 10 years of service. They would be entitled to 8 weeks of pay. And there's
Yeah.
been recently on November 1st, tons of changes in Alberta as well. So they keep on tweaking it. So it's getting interesting. And now in BC with the NDP in power, it's going to get quite interesting there as well. So we expect to see late spring, early summer, a lot of changes that will be pro employees. So very important for employers to get into that. The sooner, the better. And then,
Right. Yeah, we've advised our clients a lot on that Employment Standards Act contract rather than the old ones that used to exist, where
yes,
26 years meant 26 weeks of pay. If they,
yeah, well, we don't
no,
want that, right? So,
no.
and I'd say, right now, what happens for those who still have those older contracts or a contract that has a termination clause that is poorly written or not properly drafted, there's a few keywords missing, or someone who has no contract at all, right? So,
And they
and it can,
exist like that. I run into it all
there's
the time.
there's so many, right? So,
Yeah.
because we don't, we're happy with our staff and we don't assume that those things really apply to our business, right? So,
Right.
and but they do, right? So what can
They
happen if you
do.
don't have that in writing? Then what your employees are entitled to is common law. And
Right.
common law, before doing what I do now, I thought, common law, it's based on divorce or people living together for a while, right? So still the case, but it's
Yeah.
also a very big component of employment law. And then they'll take a look at the person's age, years of service, their
Yeah.
salary, their position, and it comes up with a number that can be anywhere between 2 weeks per year worked all the way up to sometimes 7 or 8 weeks per year. And there's a cap there that can go all the way up to 2 years of pay for an employee who was with you, no matter how big or small your business is.
Yeah.
It applies to your business as well. So make sure, if there's one thing that people get out of this, get a properly drafted contract of employment. It is the key piece to your practice to make sure that you don't have any bad surprises or don't have to pay 2 years of pay to anybody
Yeah.
down the road. You want to keep that money in your business, in your pocket, with your family, right? So where it belongs.
Right. Now I understand why my consultants are referring their clients to you. That makes sense to me because there's so much you don't know. I mean, just the things you're bringing up are not things that a lot of doctors know about. And I've even learned a few more things than what I thought I already knew. So there you go. That 90-day thing. I'm pretty sure our contract has in it that there's a 90-day period.
Yeah, good.
But we should check ours. I'll talk to my VP admin and just make sure. But I'm
You can
actually eyebrows going up on when people listen to this and go, "What? I didn't know that." What else
what
should we know?
we
What else should
so
we
many
know?
things, and you see, I'll be happy as well to do for you and your clients to review contracts, whatever they have in writing, so that way can give you a sense of where you stand, right? So
Yeah, that's kind. Yeah,
yeah,
because
so
that's what your business is there for, is to protect my clients and others that are in business for themselves and didn't have training on any of that aspect of it. We train our clients on management skills and how to hire the right staff and all of those good things and be a good executive and train them and delegate and all those things. But the HR area is not one of the areas that we go into, although my consultants know a fair amount. They didn't, I'm sure that they would be surprised at some of the things you said today. And it's just like you go to an accountant to get accounting done, you go to a consultant to get consulting, but you go to a specialist in HR to make sure you're totally T's crossed and I's dotted, right?
Absolutely. And I'd say more and more people see this now with the world changing and information being so easily accessible, as a cost of doing business. Just like you said, your coaches, your support team, your accountants, right? Your insurance. So everything
Mm,
becomes so important, for the well-being of the business and for peace of mind, right? So, and I'd say, when you work with your clients to help them delegate, well, of course, many of them will have good office managers, and a doctor, a professional will expect their office manager to basically do those things, right? So, my office manager knows HR,
everything
right?
will be taken
So,
care of.
yeah, he or she can do it, right? So,
Yeah,
and
not.
yes, but I'd say, no, exactly. I'd say it's important to be able to empower that person if you want them to be able to do their job and do it properly and not come to you every day for different questions around drama happening or different situations. If you're able to empower them with a handbook, which would basically be a guideline of what we expect you to do. So, cell phone usage, which is something huge right now, right? That people see. There's always that one person that will use their cell phone all the time, or go take breaks and bring their cell phone in the washroom with them, right? So, and
Come
stay
out
there
a
for
half
half
an
an
hour
hour.
later.
Exactly. So it happens all the time, right? So,
Mm,
but you can have laws and rules around that in your business, right? So you just have to be put in writing. And that's
yeah.
essentially very important to be able to empower your office manager so that way that person can have that discussion with the employee. They can discipline them, according to your disciplinary process. And now, sometimes we have people that will schedule patients because they're their friends or the people that they know or their neighbors directly on social media. Well, that's not the process, right? So that's not how it's supposed to be happening. There's a process that we have in place, so you follow that, right? So other
Right.
people will laugh about patients that came in today, right? So they'll laugh about different situations. They'll bash a colleague or the owner of the business, on social media. Is that okay? Right? So behavior has to be laid out clearly in terms of what you're expecting. So that way, if something happens, you're able to actually apply some common sense into your own business around what's happening. But more importantly, you're empowering, sorry, your management staff, your leadership team to take action on your behalf for the best of the business.
Wow, such good advice.
Yes,
I'm a
yes.
fan.
So
I'm a fan. Okay. Any other type of things that are showing up that you could advise people on? Like I know one of the things that my consultants mention is when the doctor calls the staff to come back in, and this may be passé now, I don't know, but they were having trouble with like the staff saying, no, I don't want to come back because I'm caring for aged parents, and it could be a risk if I came back, or my kids are not in school, and I have to stay home.
yeah, great question. So for the kids portion, there was a protected leave, right? So
Hmm.
while daycares were closed and school
Yeah.
was closed and everything else, right? So
Hmm.
that was something else that was a bit trickier.
Hmm.
However, if someone just refuses to come to work, yes, it's important to care for our relatives and our parents and our family. However, to in a case like this, people need to have a refusal to work policy,
Hmm.
that would basically outline what's expected when they don't want to come to work, right? So what you need to receive in writing in terms of confirmations, but then also what's expected from you as an employer is to also be able to provide that employee with all the documentation that you have in place to help protect them from contracting the virus, right, while they're at work. All the
Okay.
measures you're taking to keep your employees, your patients safe have to be laid out. You need to have a COVID-19 safety plan. We saw last weekend, well, actually, this coming weekend, Alberta is stepping up their measures, right? So they're stepping up to everything. It's going to bring a lot of changes, a lot more scrutiny as well. So all provinces are going to need to have that in
Oops.
writing just to better protect themselves. And yes, exactly, your PPE, right? So your policies are important, and
Yeah.
and it's crucial to have those things in writing, so that way, if ever somebody refuses to come to work, you can easily prove to them that you have everything in place to welcome them back and keep them and their family safe. And if
Right.
they refuse to come back to work, then you can discipline and go along with the disciplinary process.
Right.
And
Which
yeah,
makes sense. And because, I mean, honestly, our clients are all healthcare professionals. They have probably the safest places that you could be right now. Like you go to a grocery store, well, you have to wear your mask, but even if you have gloves on when you come home and you take the gloves off, now you touch everything that everybody touched in the store before you. I
yeah,
mean, it's like, but going in a healthcare practice right now, because it's so sterilized down and so much PPE in place, it is the safest place you can go. So if you're a staff member, it's silly to stay home over something like that when you're actually going out to grocery stores and maybe shopping for clothes and, going to restaurants and
exactly.
getting in an elevator and pushing the button or touching the gas pump and stuff like that
Yeah,
with your hands. I mean, you're putting your aged parents at risk every time you go out your door, except to a healthcare place where it's all sterilized down after every person and it's very protected.
it is exactly, and you're absolutely right. Right, so that's what most of our healthcare clients as well will say is that listen, we go above and beyond. So it's just a matter of making sure they have those things in writing. Right.
Good
Again,
point.
if it's not in writing, it does not exist. Right.
Okay.
So make sure you have your protocols, your safety protocols. And now, it comes into health and safety as well, where a lot of people assume health and safety, it's only for construction companies. But no, health and safety is for everybody, even for pencil pushers and keyboard typers like myself, right? So
Hmm.
we all have rules to follow and documentation that we need to have in place to be compliant with provincial regulations in our province. And
Right.
that's a lot of the stuff that people have no clue about, right? So, and usually when I talk to someone, yes, if it's a dentist, they'll have their IPAC most of the time pretty well in check.
Hmm.
But the health and safety manual will be, you know, if there's anything, it's going to be just there's going to be at least 100-page missing to be able
Oh,
to
wow.
keep them compliant, right? So there's so much that has to be put in place in writing to help them just keep everybody in check. And then there's even 4 trainings that are mandatory in Ontario for every single employee. And these would be the 4 steps to safety, or the basic health and safety awareness training. Then you have WMIS, which is mandatory for every employee in Ontario.
Mm.
You have the workplace violence and harassment training, that's also mandatory. And then you have the AODA training, which is the accessibility for Ontarians with disabilities, that is also another training that's mandatory. Most people
That
that
was
we
a
talk
tough
to,
one. We have stairs that
yes,
come up here. There is no elevator in the building, so we're on the second floor and it's stairs, and that's the way it is. And it's
yeah,
always
that's the way it's
like
going to
that
be,
for us.
right? So,
So unless the
so
landlord
those
has to
are
put an elevator in, it's not going to happen. So
no, and those are all trainings that are mandatory now
yeah, oh,
for local businesses. So it's all stuff that most don't know.
hmm,
Um, they also, if they have at least 5 employees and under 20, they need to have at least one health and safety representative. And if they're over 20 staff, well, then it's a joint health and safety committee that's required,
oh wow.
right? So,
I know we have
um,
my VP admin as ours, but some of my doctors do have more than 20 staff, so they would need to know that.
yeah, because then there's proper training as well that has to be taken by law.
Okay,
So very
but
important to
here's
make sure.
it's important, and I get it. And you say it's like they're missing 100 pages in that health and safety manual that they might have or might not. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking, who in the practice has the time to actually learn all that and read it all? The doctor certainly doesn't, unless they give up their home time with their kids because they're treating during the day. And that's a lot of knowledge that seems to be needed. What's the solution for that?
great question. And I'd say, when it comes to drafting an employee handbook, drafting health and safety, stay on top of it. Uh, nobody enjoys reading the Ministry of Labor's website and human rights to see if anything changed and if they have to change their policies.
Yeah.
That's most people don't even like reading their own policy books, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I asked them, "Do you
you
have a
know,
policy manual?" They go, I think so." It
yeah.
was so
So
long ago.
it's not a fun read, right? So
No.
essentially, I'd say a lot of people see value in our services because we offer a turnkey solution, right?
Yeah.
So we're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to answer any questions the owners might have or the
Mhm.
office manager if it's someone they've empowered with taking care of those things. So that person
Great.
can call in, ask any questions they might need or might have. If they need a disciplinary letter, we'll draft a letter for them. They can easily, we'll tell them what to say, what not to say during the discussion they'll have with the employee. If there's a termination that has to take place, we'll draft a termination letter, right? So we'll
Mhm.
do everything from the
Wow.
contracts to the handbooks to the health and safety policies to providing you with the proper training, um, and the IPAC manuals as well for our dentist clients, where we also create those to make sure you have the full peace of mind of knowing that you're fully compliant at all times because we keep
Right.
updating your documentation as well. So really, there's yes the way of trying to have our internal staff do it and give them a few more tasks, which they won't have more time than the dentist, right? They're running an office, right? So they're running the business for you. So
Mm.
or the chiropractor or the physios, right? So and it's it just everything changes, right? So but that person's not an expert at that,
Right.
right? So just
That's
like
the
you would
other
not
side of
ask
it.
them, yeah. So and
Well,
that's where we come in for those
you are
things.
coming in. You're coming into my universe a lot more by describing all the different things. And you're like a one Peninsula Canada is like a one-stop shop. This wasn't meant to be an infomercial for you either, but and I'm totally seeing the value of what you were saying today and the information that you've given us. I think a lot of people watching this are going to have a new insight onto things that they need to take care of in order to be totally compliant and be protected in their business while they get on with making people well and keeping them smiling or whatever profession they're in. So
Yes,
I super appreciate you taking the time today to share that with everyone. And we'll be sending this out far and wide. And but
yeah,
thank you
that's
for attending
fantastic. And I'd say, for everybody who's watching this, if you mention that you saw the video with Janice, well, we're happy to offer you all of you a 60-minute complimentary consultation to go over what you should have in place and why. And it's
today.
all thanks to Janice and the team.
Oh,
So very
yeah.
happy to be able to provide everybody who's watching this, who made it to the end, with that consultation for your own business.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. And I'm sure there'll be some people very much appreciating that. So thank you for
Yes,
taking the time with us today. And we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Janice.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.